On today's show, the Bucs didn't lose the NFC South on Sunday. They lost it one collapse at a time, and now the bill is due. Well, hello and welcome into this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms. My name is Dan Holme. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find us online, bucsreport.com. And the best way that you can help grow this show is to subscribe or follow the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. So in this edition of the Bucs Report podcast, it is over. And there was a feeling that if the Bucs found a way to win the final game of the season, somehow they could back their way into victory. But as it turns out, it was not the case. It came down to the Falcons and it came down to the Saints, and how it should have never got to that spot, right? It's the sum total of, it's not that the Buccaneers didn't get lucky, right? If only the Saints had won the game, then they would have found a way to make it to the playoffs. But what do we know from observing this team in the latter part of the season is they were not playing good football. Even if they made it to the playoffs, that would be a nice feather in their hat, right? But ultimately, they were not built for greatness this season. So that's why we're in the position that we're in. And then there was questions out there that this most certainly must be Todd Bowles' last season. We had seen enough. We as a collective fan base have seen enough. And it's easy to point fingers at the head coach, right, that he made the mistakes. And to be clear here, I'm not trying to absolve Todd Bowles of guilt here. He deserved plenty of it. But big picture, this team just did not find a way to overcome. And they made moves. As we found out that offensive coordinator Grizzard was terminated, fired, and also the quarterback's coach was let go as well. So there is going to be some change. And it's an interesting posture for the Glazers to take. As you heard Todd Bowles say that he thought he deserved another opportunity, that 3 times he had taken this team to the postseason. So let's dive into that here, talking about the state of the Bucs and how Todd Bowles will be back next season. It was announced today. I saw it from Rick Stroud on the Tampa Bay Times that he will, as a matter of fact, be back. And vibe check for you guys out there. How are you feeling about that? Hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 or at Bucs Minutecast. As for me, I'm not feeling too optimistic already about next season. But we know that there is going to be a new quarterbacks coach. We know that there's going to be a new offensive coordinator, but also, a person that cannot be absolved in guilt in this whole situation is Jason Light. That he didn't do the things, that he knew that this team was free falling, and he didn't do anything to address it. It was kind of like the season was laid out and that's what we're rolling with. And when you saw the injuries stack up and you see that they roll in JPP, you knew things weren't going according to the script. So, but let's just dive into the episode here. The collapse defines the season, and Todd Bowles owns what comes next, because let's not mess around here, Bucs fans. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers didn't lose the NFC South on Sunday. That would have been the easy thing to say. They lost it one collapse at a time. If we think back when this team was 5-1 and then 6-2, and there was the chatter out there of Baker Mayfield MVP, and that the Buccaneers were going to win yet another NFC South title. Well, that all came crashing down, and it flew in the face of common logic, because We knew this team was facing a substantial amount of injuries in the form of Jalen McMillan, Evans, Godwin, et cetera. Not to mention that Bucky Irving missed a bit, and Tristan Wirfs. That when this team is healthy, it was going to be truly bulletproof. As it turns out, Baker Mayfield took a step or two back, and the Buccaneers actually played poor football when those key additions came back. And the season didn't end with a tiebreaker. It didn't end with Atlanta beating New Orleans. It ended weeks ago when this team was 6-2 to unraveling in slow motion. And that's where everything starts. You know, it was the undoing of this team. It was, you know, Baker, I don't think, playing 100% healthy at the end of the season. And we know that he did what he could do and ultimately was a key contributor in the Bucs winning that final game of the season, as you saw him scrambling when he wasn't feeling 100%, but also that scrambling, right, and not diving when you know you're going to get hit is also what led to his injury, even though, you know, he wasn't sidelined a whole lot. We do know that, as a matter of fact, he was not playing 100%, because that's the harsh reality, Bucs fans. And I hate to say harsh reality, but it is. I don't really know anyone out there that is super excited to hear Todd Bowles back, but he is. And that's the reality. 3 straight division titles, a contract through 2028. The Glazers made their decision. Bowles earned the chance to stay. And it's all about a resume, right? In a league of what have you done for me lately, he can point to that. You're going to fire me? Look at the NFC South, which, to be clear here, the NFC South is the worst. You know, when you take a look at the teams that won, I mean, it's a tip of the hat to Carolina for getting it done, but they weren't exactly a masterclass out there as well. But the Glazers, you know, who own this team, they made their decision and they feel like Bowles earned the chance to stay. How optimistic do you feel going into next season? Again, I ask you. But this doesn't mean this year gets a free pass. 7 losses in 9 games, blown leads, the Falcons game that still makes your stomach turn. That was a winnable game. You know, it definitely should have been against a truly depleted, awful Atlanta team, and they found a way to lose, finishing 8-9 in the weakest division in football and watching the playoffs from the couch. I don't think that that's what Baker had in mind. I don't think that that is what Evans or any of these players had in mind, that there's a long history of doing great things. And the changes already started. Josh Grizzard is out, and that's not nothing. That's accountability. The offense went from clutch to broken. How they tried to promote internally and crossing fingers and toes and hoping that it was going to work for the best. And listen, generally speaking, the Bucs made some solid decisions. Cohen, as we know, doing a good job with the Jags, and Canales, the head coach of the Panthers, who ultimately ended up winning the NFC South. But definitely a misstep for the Bucs this last time with Josh Grizzard. Now, 17 points a game over the final month. Baker beat up, offensive line never settled, no rhythm, no answers. And you could tell that things were going off the rails when there was infighting on the sidelines during the game, that this team was truly unraveling. You saw Tristan Wirfs have to step in and settle it down. And let's be clear, this is still Todd Bowles' defense. 3rd and long disasters, 4th and forever conversions, 24 points a game allowed when defense is your identity. Average is not good enough. And ultimately why Todd Bowles will not relinquish the reins of the defense, even though I think that we know that's the right idea. He does not want to do that. So yeah, Bowles is back, but the leash just got a lot shorter. Ish, I guess, right? He's back, right? New coordinator, staff changes coming. No excuses left. That's the tone. That's the foundation. Everything else we're talking about flows from that. So, you know, it's a frustrating feeling. And then we see that Harbaugh was let go from the Ravens, and a lot of people clamoring online, thinking that that would be a good fix for this team. Would Harbaugh have wanted to come to Tampa? That's a question. And would he ultimately be able to get more out of this team than Bowles? Knee-jerk reaction, yes. I really think he could have. but we won't know. And that's the position that we're in. Where, as we watch the teams go into the postseason, I'm talking the Panthers, and how do they fare? When you take a look at it, the Rams look really good. Seattle looks really good. And at the end of the day, the hard, cold reality of it is that if the Buccaneers somehow found a way to back their way into the playoffs, I think we ultimately know they were not built for going the distance, if you know what I'm talking about. All right, so coming up here after the break, the season wasn't stolen. It was given away. I'll discuss straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report Podcast, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network, also simulcast on the Bucs Minicast podcast feed, a part of the Fans First Sports Network. So let's next keep doing the post-mortem on an ugly season. I guess I'm going to say the highs and lows. And doing this show all season, from the preseason, there was so much hope, so much optimism, and that rolled its way through the quarter point to the halfway point of the season, that the vibes around this team were good, but ultimately not enough to push the Bucs into another NFC South championship. But like I said, the season wasn't stolen, it was given away. And this is the part that hurts the most, because the Bucs controlled their own destiny. Nobody ripped it from them. They handed it over. You lose to the Saints. You blow the Falcons game after leading big late. You lose to Carolina the first time. You drop winnable games in December. The football season is not long enough to have a losing streak that's that long. If this was baseball, hockey, something like that, you can overcome. But the football season is so short in comparison to the rest of major sports that you can't do it. And the Bucs were exposed. That, like I said in the first segment, this team seemed like on paper to be bulletproof in the latter part of the season, but as it turns out, played some of their worst football. Now, win just one of those, and we're talking playoff prep instead of off-season speculation. Let me underline this. Bold-faced type is that it should not have come down to the game that I'm talking about where it was the Falcons and the Saints. The Bucs should have won an earlier game, and they would not have put themselves in the position that they were in. That's not bad luck. That's not injuries. That's execution and adjustments failing at the worst possible time. And one thing that we know for certain that needs to get addressed in the offseason is the defense. The defense of this team was flat out deplorable for large swaths of the season. And again, that's why I say that, I'm not absolving Jason Light. He knew it was a problem. He did nothing to try and fix it. So there is coaching positions that need to be addressed and the defense that needs to get shored up. Otherwise, this is going to be a ditto. This is going to be a copy, if you're old enough to know what I'm talking about, next season. Because the Bucs went from being resilient comeback team to one that couldn't get off the field or sustain drives. That's not random. That's a trend. And ultimately, the Bucs started playing very well. And I had Steve Versnick on here earlier in the season, and that was a time where there was a lot of those late game heroics, and I asked him, is it sustainable? And he said, of course it's not. And the Bucs did it for quite a few games where it came down to the wire. They had comeback games. But the feeling was that those games were coin tosses, right? That they definitely could have gone in the other direction. They won them, but I think to a certain extent they got a little lucky. And the Panthers winning the division at 8-9 feels, well, just disgusting. An 8-9 football team winning the NFC South. When I said that the NFC South is deplorable, it's, kind of Bush League. It's not an understatement. But the Bucs didn't get to complain about it. Not even when you went 1-5 in the division, not when the December football was supposed to be your strength. This wasn't heartbreak. This was erosion. And that's a much harder thing to fix. And, the things that Todd Bowles had working against him in previous seasons, right? The poor clock management, the not wanting to go for it, always going for the safe play. That was ghosts of Buccaneers past. And, when we talk about the resume of Todd Bowles, that's something. He can hang his hat on the 3 NFC South titles under his leadership. but also, the games that were blown. I think that in a lot of ways, he got a bit of a pass. So it'll ultimately be interesting to see what this team can muster next season. All right, next, let's pivot to Lavonte David. It still represents everything this team wants to be. And, was that the last Lavonte David that we saw? There's questions about Mike Evans. And big picture, what is the future of Baker Mayfield on the Bucs? Started, like I said, just a favorite for MVP. And it's going to be interesting to see long-term, is he the answer? And it sounds like a funny thing to say that big picture, I think that Baker Mayfield has been a great quarterback. But, there were those games where the Buccaneers took quite a few steps back, that some of that goes on his shoulders as well. But talking about the OG, Lavonte David, still represents everything this team wants to be. If that Panthers game was Lavonte David's last regular season snap in pewter, soak it in, because that's what leadership looks like. And, just the many things that he has accomplished over his career, that there are not a lot of Lavonte Davids in waiting, ready to help this team. He ties Derek Brooks for the franchise tackles lead. Then, with the season on the line, forces a fumble and recovers it himself. Of course he does. That is why he is who he is. And he's older. He's lost a step. We all see it. But when the moment demanded it, Lavonte David answered, just like he has done his entire career. So if it is Lavonte's last season, if it is Mike Evans last season, that, you take a look at it, that they're going to leave behind quite a career, quite a legacy in Tampa. And even more that, Jason Light is going to have to try to plug a hole, right? And, the thing of it is, and the chatter out there is, I was listening to Bruce Arians. He was on some podcast or somewhere that I saw it, and he said that the Buccaneers will draft and they'll be back on their feet next season. Okay, that I think is Bruce Arians trying to be nice about this team. But if you do have David step back and you say Mike Evans, say both of those players retire, it's going to be difficult. And what is their motivation? That is the big question facing this team, because they leave behind quite a legacy. And just like he's been doing for years, Lavonte David, over a decade through winning seasons and a whole lot of bad ones, that he has been here for the truly bad seasons. What comes to mind is the Jameis years where, there were a lot of games that seemed like they were going to be slam dunks, and Jameis would throw an interception. So he has seen the truly ugliness. He saw the glorious Tampa seasons when Tom Brady was here, and now kind of the vacuum, right? That it has come full circle. And that's the position that we're in. Because here's the scary part. If Lavonte walks, you don't replace that. You don't draft that in April. You might draft someone that will grow into that, right? But you're not going to have someone that's fully cooked right out of the gates. You don't sign that in March. That's culture. That's accountability. That is the heartbeat of this franchise. And the defense still leaned on him when it mattered the most. And that tells you everything about where this locker room really is. That, there are certain players that are plug and play. Like, this guy didn't work out, we'll just plug it in with someone else. You see that with the cornerback position and various other positions. But certain players leave that impact. And when I say Lavonte David is that OG, he is one of the ones that's been here a long, long time, and definitely left his imprint on this team. Definitely not big shoes to fill. That much I know for sure. All right, so coming up here after the break here, the window is still open, but it's shaking. Straight ahead. All right, welcome back into this edition of the Bucs Report Podcast, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network, simulcast on the Bucs Minicast podcast feed, a part of the Fans First Sports Network. So in the final segment here, doing the postmortem of the Buccaneers season. Going to be honest with you guys, I did not have this on my bingo card when I started doing the show again here in the preseason, that I was going to be talking about an early exit That, when we took a look at the wide receiver room, when we took a look at the running backs and the emergence of Bucky Irving and truly great glimpses from Emeka Egbuka, that it seemed like destined for greatness. You mix that in with Baker Mayfield, who had a tremendous season last season and did for good chunks of this season, but it all fell apart, right? And this thing that we told that the team's going to be better when those players return was fool's gold. It wasn't the case. The team actually got worse. The injuries mounted. The defense was porous, and Baker Mayfield was not the Baker that we saw from the beginning of the season. So talking about that, the window is open. So what do we know? We need a new offensive coordinator. We need a new quarterbacks coach. And I don't want a promotion internally. I know that, you have had success from that before, and the Buccaneers have had success with Cohen and Canales, going out and, kind of picking out unproven commodities and turning those gems into gold there. But I think that I want more of a proven coach in those positions, that if we are a team that's not, let's say, really good out of the gate next season, leading with your best foot forward seems to be like the right idea to me. So if you have a great coach to put these unproven players and put them in a good spot, I think that is advantageous. So let's talk about what's next, because this offseason is massive. I think that the Buccaneers need to nail the draft this season, right? I think they did a good job with Egbuka, but we know that we need more. We need help on defense. 18 unrestricted free agents. That's not trimming the edges. That's the core. Mike Evans, Levante David, Jamel Dean, Rashad White, Cade Otton, key defensive pieces. You can't keep everyone. You can't stand still either. And the NFC South is still wide open. You take a look at it, Carolina 8-9. And for all intents and purposes, the Atlanta Falcons should have been better. With Penix Jr., there was a feeling, at least amongst the people that covered the sport, that this team, or the Falcons rather, were going to be the team to really rival some of the better teams in the NFC South. The Buccaneers is who I'm really looking at there. And as it turns out, that fell apart for them. And then you take a look at the Saints, for example, a team that is in desperate need of a quarterback. There has been a vacuum there since Drew Brees ultimately hung up the cleats there. That it's going to be interesting to see the posture of the other teams around the NFC South. Carolina winning it with an 8-9 record, sub 500. That's laughable when you take a look around the NFL, the standings, and see the teams that made it to the playoffs, how they did. Because let's just take a peek-see here. The NFC here, the Eagles 11-6, the Bears 11-6. Then you got the Panthers 8-9, the Seahawks 14-3. You take a look at the AFC, the Patriots 14-3, Steelers 10-7, and Jags 12-4, and the Broncos 14-3. Those teams, wow. I mean, they really put together some seasons. And then you take a look at the South with the Panthers, Bucs, Falcons, and Saints. And the team that wins the NFC South is 8-9. Wow. Some people could point to maybe you need to mix those up a little bit to spread the wealth a little bit. Otherwise, another thing that could be said is that the Panthers, Bucs, Falcons, and Saints, they need to do some things to make their teams a whole lot better. Because, we can say that the Panthers did what they did with an 8-9 record, but you put the Bucs in the NFC East, the NFC North, or in the AFC, they would not be in the position that they're in. So it is a far cry. We could talk about the Bucs blowing an opportunity, but we're talking about 8-9 at the end of the day, folks. And the Panthers won it with that 8-9 record. That's very telling about how truly poor the NFC South is here. And why? There's big shoes to fill. But the organization has to decide who it is. What's their identity? We know that Bowles is back. We know that the offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach is going to be different. And that's the question. Are you retooling around Baker in the offense? Are you reshaping the defense post-Levante? Are you modernizing the coaching approach? That, this And I say this because I've said it the last couple seasons on this show and on the Bucs Minicast, that this is Todd Bowles' last chance to prove that he's worth it. And I've said that the last couple seasons, and every year he keeps returning to this team. And at the end of the day, what the Glazers can hang their hat on is NFC South. 3 seasons that he's done it, right? That's not enough. He missed it this season, right? And that also has to go on that resume. Not to mention the full total package, the clock mismanagement, the inability to do risky things out there. Because next year, nobody is accepting 8-9. And even if you can win at an 8-9 record, set the bar higher for yourself, right? And that's the thing that's frustrating about it. But the thing of it is, not with this division, not with this roster, not with Todd Bowles still in charge. There's a real belief that with Todd Bowles at the helm, this team is not going to be good enough next year. And that's the tough part. This season wasn't a disaster. It wasn't. Like I said, to start this season, they were favorites to win the NFC South. But it is a warning, and the Buccaneers need to respond this offseason, and how they respond is going to tell us everything about where this franchise is headed. That's the state of the Bucs right now, kind of doom and gloom. And I got to imagine, Bucs fans watching or listening to this, you got to be feeling a little bit like, what's going on here? This team has done, great things for so many years that it has been a slow swirling around the drain for the last couple seasons here. And, one of the things that I talked about that I tweeted out here as well is that this team, and it's something that's changed in the NFL, is that we want to pat ourselves on the back, even when your team is playing horribly. And I think about the final game of the season, and you see someone get a first down, and they're like, or if they get a touchdown, they're doing the dance. Put the damn, celebrating away. Your team is on the cusp of losing it all, and you're excited about a first down. You're excited about a touchdown. Put your head down and keep pushing. We don't have any time for doing that. And that's one of the things that truly irritates me, the bravado, the showboat. When you're in the Titanic and you're taking on a lot of water, you're like, hey, I scooped out a bucket of water. High five. We're still going to drown this damn ship. That's where the Bucs were at. And I think they need to take it seriously. And to a certain extent, I think that the Buccaneers were resigned to the fact that it was over, that there wasn't that hunger to get it done. And a lot of those games that I talked about this season that they should have won, they should have beat the Saints, right? They absolutely should have beat the Saints. They should have beat the Falcons. They win one of those games, we're talking about something different. They win 2 of those. They would have sealed their fate and then some. It's all about those golden opportunities that they missed out on. And that is ultimately why I am reflecting about the end of the season here in early January. Some teams are getting ready for the next round. I'm talking about the Panthers. And some teams have loftier goals of who they're going to play in the Super Bowl. What I'm going to summarize this season is, in a nutshell, missed opportunity, taking your eyes off the prize. And also, I think that there was some infighting in the locker room that we really didn't know a whole lot about, as it was boiling to the surface at the end of the season. A lot needs to be changed. If I was the Glazers, I would have cut Todd Bowles. I would have. I think this team needs a sea change. I don't think that this team as is good enough, because you bring in these pieces here or there. Say you draft well, or you bring in this guy. There was a lot of people hyped about Hassan Reddick too, and how did that pan out for the team? Big additions are part of it, but the leadership is of paramount importance. And I think as is right now, you got rid of the offensive coordinator, you got rid of the quarterback's coach. That's not enough. I would have got rid of Bowles and brought a new face in here to try to turn this ship around. Kind of a clean break, a clean slate for the next coach. As of right now, it seems like the Buccaneers are up against it in the fall, going into it yet again. So I hope that Jason Light has some rabbit up his sleeve that can help save this team. Hopefully addresses the defense. Hopefully he plugs the holes in the leadership coaching roles there and puts the Buccaneers in a better position to win. Because right now, got to be honest with you, a sour taste in my mouth, a sour taste that I want to be gone when the fall is here. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of the Bucs Report, part of the Bucs Report Podcast Network. Again, the best way you can help grow this show is to subscribe to the Bucs Report on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. I'll talk to you again next time.